So, hi, this is Erica. I am talking to you from Sacramento. I ran for Congress. I suspended my campaign to support Maya Vang for Congress, who's now challenging our Congresswoman, Doris Matsui. And this whole episode is dedicated to Doris. Doris Matsui. Doris Matsui, who recently turned 81 years old and who is running for, an 11th, 12th, 13th term for Congress. I lost count. But 20 years ago, she replaced her first husband, who died while in office, and he had served 26 years before her. Which means, if you do the math, means that he had been representing Sacramento proper since 1979. So since 1979, we've had a Matsui representing the fourth largest economy in the world. Capital of the fourth largest economy in the world, in case I forgot to say the capital part. So, where do I begin? Earlier this week, I had a very negative experience with Doris Matsui's office, and I actually recorded a TikTok about it. And I actually recorded a very angry podcast episode that night about it. But I decided not to publish it because I thought I might have sounded a bit unhinged, but I was really just sick and tired of her staff in her office. So basically, I called her office because I had seen some especially disturbing images from Gaza in my Instagram feed, and Doris Matsui notoriously has commenting turned off on her Instagram account, so you cannot comment on anything. And on the rare occasion I do tag her in an Instagram story, for those who don't know what that means, if someone shares a post on Instagram and you follow them, or you don't even have to follow them, but you can share it into your Instagram stories, which are, highlights that you can put on your profile, articles, pictures, things you want your followers to see. I will share something from her feed and tag her so that the person moderating her account can see it, but you can also tell when someone has viewed your Instagram story, and her staff never view my Instagram stories. I think that they never view probably any Instagram stories that reference her, so there really is no way to contact her. But they have commenting turned off, I highly suspect, because she is endorsed by AIPAC, and after October 7th, and the genocide began against Palestinians in a weird effort to get back hostages who had been taken by Hamas from Israel. I think people probably flooded the comments, and her staff couldn't take it or just didn't want to deal with it. But instead of, addressing it, pretending that AIPAC doesn't exist and that Doris, doesn't ignore her Palestinian constituents, they just decided to turn off the comments. Anyhow, I digress. So I saw some especially disturbing imagery on Instagram, and so I hadn't called her office in a while, and I checked her social media first, though, and I saw she hadn't said anything about the broken ceasefire because Israel was still slaughtering innocent Palestinians, despite the fact that there was a purported ceasefire in place. So I called her office, her district office, and it was a young woman who answered, and I just said, hi, like I usually do. I'm very nice at the start. I said, hi, I'm Erica. I'm a constituent. I just wanted to leave a comment for my congresswoman. And so then they asked for your name, and I said Erica, and she says Erica Lee, or she said Erica what? And I said Erica Lee, and then she said Erica Lee out loud. And then I said, well, I just saw some imagery of the fact that the last veterinarian in Gaza was killed. And there was something else I saw, I can't remember suddenly what it was. But I said, what is Doris Matsui going to do about that? Is she going to sign on to a letter? Is she going to draft a letter to talk about how we are still killing innocent Palestinians with our bombs? Israel's killing them with bombs that we give to them. And she said, well, her press releases are located on her website. Her social media is more for local events. And at one point I said, that's not true, because she regularly posts national things on her website, federal level issues on her website, things that she wants us to see with regard to Trump and so on. That's not local. So, but then I entertained her because I figured she was new. And like I said, I'm not rude when I call in initially. And so I went to her webpage and I looked in the search bar like this young lady told me to do for Gaza under her press releases. And I did tell her, if this were important to Doris Matsui, it would be shared on her social media. She shouldn't have to go to her website. Most people don't think to go to her website to look for news, right? And of course, there was nothing there. So at one point I said, all right, well, can I give you my email address, or can I ensure that you have the right one so I get a response? And so we confirmed my email, and then my email and or phone number, one or both. And then I said, may I have a response? And she said, no. I said, no. And she says, well, you called this office before, right? And I said, yeah, I've called the office before. And she says, but so you already know her position on this topic. I said, not this very specific topic. I've called about Gaza. I still don't get an answer on that. But she said no. And she kept trying to talk over me. And my hunch was that Aaron Jones was in the background, her staffer who has been regularly rude to me. He's the one that really attempts to gaslight constituents and tells them that, having a town hall that's completely scripted online is an actual town hall. That was my first interaction with him, even though I told him my background. So that's just more gaslighting from her team. And so at the end of that conversation, I said, well, I'm going to make a TikTok about this, and then we hung up, and I did make a TikTok about it that night. So that was that. All right. So that was Monday or Tuesday. Wednesday, this 2 days ago, Wednesday, her staff on her congressional Facebook page, they drop a link, a web form for a town hall for the next day at 6 p.m. And it says you have to RSVP, you have to be a constituent, and to complete the web form that's right there. This web form was not available that I could tell on Twitter or Instagram or any other social media, just on Facebook, where, let's just be honest, there aren't as many young people on Facebook as there are, the older demographic. So that was a choice for sure. And if she really wanted everyone to come, as many as people as possible, she would have put it on all of her social media channels. But no, alas, it was just Facebook. And they said that you had, I think it was until 11 or noon the next day. I think it was 11 the next day to RSVP. And then after noon, they would send you an email with the location. Why the secrecy? I mean, this isn't a top secret fundraiser or anything. This is so weird. It's very weird. And for context, too, this is the first town hall, in-person town hall she's held since whenever. She had a closed labor forum this past August that I wasn't allowed into by Fabrizio Sasso. And it was for union delegates and union staff. So I am, I'm heavily involved in unions, but I wasn't allowed in. But it was closed, and I heard it was an unsuccessful one from attendees' point of view, of course, because she can't really answer questions. It's all word salad. So anyhow, and I was told that had been requested since the prior February, and that was August. That's how long it took for Doris Matsui's office to schedule a labor forum per, a person and an organization, Central Labor Council, who endorses her every cycle. So anyhow, back to this town hall. So what I did is I immediately RSVP'd. It was later in the day because I didn't notice it at first. I RSVP'd, and then immediately the response I got was, "Oh, you've been waitlisted. We're full. But if there are openings, we will contact you." And so I foolishly thought in earnest, wow, okay, I guess a lot of people want to go see her. And so I had made a TikTok about it and said, hey, if you get the address for this place tomorrow, please let me know, because maybe there's room and I can go in, I can just show up and, bother the staff, basically make them make hard decisions. I don't know. But they know I'm a constituent, So, but then after I posted that, some people said, well, I just went to go look and I RSVP'd, I'm a constituent, and I got in. I didn't get a waitlisting message. That's very interesting now, isn't it? So I went and then I RSVP'd again, and I used an email address that they don't have on file in the office. As someone who calls a lot, a constituent, they give you give them your email address at some point if you want a response or whatever. I use an email address they don't have. And I misspelled my last name on purpose. I gave myself 3 E's instead of 2, Leee. Just in case it was by name as well. And I got in. I wasn't immediately rejected. So that was also suspicious. And so then the next day, I also learned that other people who could be perceived as potential agitators by the office, maybe people who call in a lot, that they were also immediately waitlisted. So this RSVP form they created, in my opinion, and this is an allegation, I don't have 100% confirmation, but it's definitely what it seems like, is that it was either pre-programmed with the email addresses of constituents who could potentially RSVP and then immediately waitlisted, or someone was viewing them the second they came in. I mean, that would have been short turnaround, because literally as I hit submit, I was immediately waitlisted as if they were full. So I don't know. So anyway, the next day comes around, and so, Thursday morning. So I'm wondering to myself, too, as I wait to see if I get the email with the address after noon, the address of the town hall, this top secret location, closed to the public. I called her DC office because the local office wasn't open yet, and I asked, would this town hall be live streamed? And they said no. I said, no. So why wouldn't you live stream a town hall? You would think you would want as many people as possible to see you. And it's again, or the topic would going to be the government shutdown. And the young woman had this answer ready to go. She said, well, we're just following the guidance from the DC Metropolitan Police or whatever she said, that it's dangerous to live stream town halls because it puts constituents in danger. Or it's dangerous for the constituents or to protect constituents, something like that. Like, that's interesting. That is very interesting because you know who live streams their town hall on occasion are Eric Swalwell, Ami Bera, the other Sacramento representative, plenty of other Democrats whose in-person town halls I've gone to as well, and more. I've never heard this. It sounds like an arbitrary rule, but okay. So we hung up. And I also said, will it be published later, recorded and published later? And she said, yes. I said, yes, but will it be heavily edited, to edit down, parts that where she, might have not answered very well or got booed so they don't go viral. And she said, no, it should be published in its entirety. As of 4:00 Pacific time, it has not been published yet, by the way. So, but interesting though, I decided to call the DC Metropolitan Police. And I asked them, hey, so is there some guidance with regard to live streaming town halls for members of Congress? And also, she's in Sacramento. She's not in DC too, right? And this guy had never heard of that. But he said, let me send you to the public information officer. I was like, fine, sure. But then I got their voicemail and I hung up. So then I called Eric Swalwell's office. I have his number programmed in my phone, by the way. I like to call and needle him on the stuff he does and doesn't support and things he says about Zohar Mamdani. He says negative things about Zohar Mamdani, by the way. So anyway, we called the office and I said, hey, I'm not a constituent. I just wanted to ask, though, I have a question. My congresswoman or my representative is Congresswoman Doris Matsui, and she's having a town hall tonight, and it won't be live streamed per her staff because they said the DC police advise against it to protect constituents. And they said, we've never heard of that. And I said, yeah. I said, Eric Swalwell never misses a chance to put his face on TV or online. This guy takes more selfies than my beauty school classmates, right? So they said, well, no, we haven't heard that. And I said, yeah, I thought that was very strange. I said, because I see, live stream town halls all the time. You can't always understand them because of acoustics or something, but I've never heard that. And so then they became interested / concerned because they wanted to make sure that they weren't doing anything wrong, right? So they said they were going to reach out to the police. And I said, well, Doris Matsui's office has a good point of contact over there, so maybe you should ask them. But they kind of chuckled over the whole thing too. They thought that was not a thing. And so then I called Ami Bera's office and I said, hey, I said, I have a question. Have you heard of this directive or guidance that says we shouldn't live stream town halls to protect constituents? And they said, no, we haven't heard that. That's interesting. I was like, well, Doris Matsui, she said that her office says that they're not going to live stream her very last minute town hall tonight because they want to protect constituents. That's what the DC police have said, that live streaming it puts them in jeopardy, puts their lives in danger. And they said, we haven't heard that either. So I think they were going to follow up on it too. And I was like, well, call Doris Matsui's office. So moving on. So then noon comes and goes and I don't get an email from them. I check my spam. I do multiple word searches in my email. I even get on my laptop and double check. No email from the office. And several others who were able to register because they used a different email address or like fudged their address or something just to get in because they saw they were waitlisted immediately. They also didn't get it. And then I got confirmation that more people who had RSVP'd the night before using their actual email address, people who had called to the office a few times to complain or, share negative feedback, they also were waitlisted immediately. So I got friends though, and I learned where it was. I was forwarded the email, so I knew where it was and I published it online. And so I went to the town hall fully expecting to get pushback, right? I thought that would be a big mistake on their part, but I wouldn't have been surprised. I even put my megaphone in my purse. It's kind of a smaller megaphone, but it's loud, and I put it in my purse in case I got kicked out or rejected and I would make a stink outside, right? But I walked up, there was Aaron Jones, her staffer, the one I always complain about being rude. And, who tries to gaslight people. And so I said, hi, Aaron. He said, hey. And I walked right by him, walked right in. And I gave them my name and I was checked in. And then I was given a slip of paper to write a question on. And I said, oh, okay. So I wrote a question on it. And then I said, are all of these questions going to go to the moderator to pull from the basket? That was one thing I forgot to say. Was in the email, it said, if you want to ask a question, doors will open at 5:15 and you should get there as early as possible so that you can write a question and, maybe the moderator will read it. But they say put it into a basket. So what that means is that the staff is going to go through the questions right before, right? And pull out the ones where they don't want her to answer because they could potentially make her look bad, right? So I asked the woman who checked me in and she said, oh, she doesn't know, but they're the baskets. When she said, well, you could put them in the basket, she says, or you can talk to George, the communications person. I said, oh, George is here. So I've never met George, but I know his name because I know I've emailed him a few times about why Doris Matsui's Instagram comments are still turned off, right? So I thought he was a DC person. Maybe he'd flown in. I don't know. But I said, oh, George is here. And then she looked around and she says, well, he was just here. I said, oh, okay, well, I'll wait. So I'm just waiting. And then I see some people I know who are coming in too. And they were all talking about how we got the email or how I had to get it from someone else and more. And so then this young woman who checked me in, she said, oh, well, maybe he can answer your question. And she pointed to Aaron. Aaron's a staffer. We don't get along. And I said, well, I don't think he's going to help me. But I said, well, okay. I said, Aaron, well, I was asking about the questions that we're going to write on these slips of paper and put into those baskets. I asked if staff are going to go through them before handing the basket to the moderators to pull out the questions that, could potentially make Doris Matsui look bad. And he said, we're going to get into as many questions as possible. And I said, that's not the question I asked, Aaron. And then what else did I say? I asked about the Instagram comments. Oh, I said I was going to ask George too about why the comments on Instagram are still turned off, despite repeated reminders to the office that they're turned off. And that makes Doris Matsui not accessible to her constituents, especially when she doesn't hold town halls. Like this is the first one in a long time. And he said, George is going to be able to answer that question today. This is the smug asshole. He's just a fucking asshole. I'm sorry. I get sick and tired of people saying that Doris Matsui deserves our respect, to be quite honest as well, because this is a type of environment she fosters. This is the staff she appreciates, treating constituents like this. And this is going to matter in a few minutes when I get to the meat of the town hall. But, I mentioned to Aaron too, I said, you have the power, Aaron. So you have the power. We don't have the power. And I accused him of lying. I don't remember what it was exactly that I said, but I said he was, why you're lying to constituents or something like that. And as I said that, I thought, oh, maybe they're going to find a way to kick me out now because I accused him of lying. And he definitely heard me, but nothing happened to me. I think they're just scared to do anything against me, to be quite honest. They know I'm going to talk about it all the time, either on social media or here at this point. So anyhow, so at one point I just threw my question in the basket. All I asked was, will you ever support Medicare for all? Something like that. Because I know they're not going to pull my card anyway, but I just threw it in there. So then a woman I know who went, she saved me a seat in the second row, actually. She said, I'm in the second row. And she said, you deserve to look at Doris Matsui in the face. And I said, okay. So I sat there and it was an excellent seat. It was second row, but my seat kind of went past the last seat in the first row. So I was very central to Doris Matsui. So there are people around me. We started chatting. You could tell some people were big fans of hers. But here's the thing too. This Elks Lodge number 6 was not full by any means. It was like a third full or half full. There was a ton of space. I wanted to take a picture, but I was trying not to get people's faces in it, so I didn't take a picture. But it was not full at all. So this waitlisting bullshit, because it was so full, I don't believe for a second. The number of people who were there looked like it could be a number of people who saw that last minute Facebook post to RSVP and RSVP'd, minus the number of, younger people probably who RSVP'd, and then me, I'm not super young, but you know what I mean, who were rejected. And there was also a Sacramento Bee photographer there that Aaron wouldn't let in at first either. He came in with his big lenses, and I overheard Aaron saying, oh, we can't allow you in because for protection or something like that. I'm pretty sure he mentioned that overwrought protection thing. And then he says, but if there's room, we'll let you in, which also made no sense then, right? So the guy went and sat down, and then eventually I went over and sat next to him, and I just introduced myself, and I said, oh, I used to work at the Sacramento Bee. He said, oh, really? And I said, yeah. And I said, actually, I ran for Congress against Doris Matsui. I'm not now, but I told him what had happened with the RSVPs and how a lot of people were waitlisted automatically and how a lot of people didn't get the email in the end too. And he found that interesting. But so eventually I went inside. It was pointed out to me that Robin Epley from the Sacramento Bee was there, and she was sitting in the back. So I'm glad she was there. I thought the photographer would let in. And so then the town hall began. So there was a table on the stage, and there was space for two people. And the two people who introduced Doris Matsui were Sierra Health Foundation CEO Chet Hewitt, and then Jessica Altman, Executive Director of Covered California, the state's official marketplace for health insurance that was created under the Federal Affordable Care Act. They were there at the table. So Chet was the official moderator, and he stood up and he said he'd known Doris and worked with her for a very long time. Who hasn't at this point in Sacramento politics? But, praising her. And then he gave the floor, I think it was next to Doris Matsui. So Doris Matsui read a long speech, entirely scripted. She spoke very slowly. The whole thing was scripted. I think at this point, members of Congress, if they're going to hold a town hall, I mean, it's great to have some notes, but she looked down more than she looked up for sure. And then she asked the Covered CEO or Covered California CEO to share a few words, and she did, and that was fine. Her name was Jessica Altman again. And then they went into the questions. Now, first of all, remember I said that the office staff were very concerned about protecting constituents, so they weren't going to live stream the town hall. Well, very interesting that several people started to live stream, and nobody went to say no, or they went to start and record, and no one told them to put it away if they were so concerned, right? So someone from DSA was there live streaming the whole thing. It was very obvious. The guy in front of me was recording, and then since everyone else had their phones out, I started to live stream on TikTok. And everyone saw me. I was in the second row. No one said a word. So we know that that was bullshit, that they didn't advertise this as a live streamed event. We know that was complete bullshit, Aaron Jones. Complete bullshit, DC office staff. Complete bullshit. Complete bullshit. So I was live streaming, and then I had some viewers, and people were like, oh my God, Doris Matsui's alive. Oh my gosh, she's actually holding a town hall, So the guy pulled some questions, Chet, who was very nice. He started pulling questions from the basket, asking them to her. I can't even remember some of them. They were just so generic, and ones that made her not even sound good, but just gave her a chance to just say a bunch of words, string them in a row, and speak very slowly. That's what it felt like. It was nothing, like nothing of substance. And then at one point, a woman named Patricia, whom I know, who goes to all these town halls and meetings, and we belong to a lot of the same clubs. Oh, when they called on her too, so they pulled a card out and they read your name. And when they called on Patricia, a guy a couple rows behind me leaned over to the person he was with and said, she's a My Vang supporter. I don't know if he meant that as a pejorative or not, but probably not. That he probably didn't think that was good. I don't know, but that's like, this is the tone. So Patricia got up and asked about Medicare for All, and asked her directly, would she support Medicare for All, and gave the exact bill number. And this is not the first time that she's been asked about this. I know people, even possibly her, asked about that in the labor forum. I have called the office and emailed the office and, even used the web form to her office many times. I have asked her health staffer. I know where her health staffer is. I emailed her directly several times and asked specifically why she doesn't support Medicare for All, so I can arrange a group of advocates to come in and share our experiences so that she could perhaps change her mind, right? But her health staffer never got back to me. Never. So Doris Matsui started to give some word salad response. Just, on and on and on, how everyone should have health care. It's a right. Okay, whatever. She even started talking about how Trump is demolishing the White House and how he wants to turn everything golden. I don't know if that was with this answer. I don't think it was actually. But, she just tries to find ways to stretch out her answers by adding more words that have nothing to do with the question. So she just went on and on and on and on. And so, I'm sitting there. And I know personally that I have asked her office about this specifically many times. Still don't have an answer. She won't say whether or not she'll support Medicare for All at all. And so before I can help myself, I say, well, you're not answering the question. And I said, we're struggling. It's hard. I'm a working class renter. And at some point I said, you have privilege. And this woman, as she's wearing a $10,000 Van Cleef and Arpels necklace, said, I don't have privilege. I mean, honestly, that should be career ending right there. She said, I don't have privilege, as she's married to a billionaire. And people chuckled and groaned. Not even her fangirls applauded that. She's got a lot of fangirls in the audience, you know? So she just said, I don't have privilege. And then, you know, she's still not answering the question. I said, you're not answering really any of the questions. And so then the moderator interrupted me and said, you know, we do have some order here. We agreed to some rules or whatever. But, you know, if you're able to ask your question in a concise manner, you know, basically I can have the floor. And I said, okay. So, you know, I have been trying to talk to Doris Matsui for a very long time, and her staff has been ignoring me. I've gone by her district office. I've spoken to her district director, Glenda Corcoran, who just goes, of course she meets with constituents. She does not. We know she does not, because she's the only member of Congress who does not have a scheduling form on her House website, and that is by design. That is by design. Look at your member of Congress's website. If you go, your Senate or your House representative, your senator or your House representative, there is always a scheduling option on there. It'll say schedule a meeting, request a meeting, meeting request, schedule an appearance. And any of those links that you select, it'll give you a web form, or it will tell you what email address to send a scheduling request to. It's very easy. They may not respond, but it's very easy to submit a request. Her website doesn't have that anywhere. And when you ask her office about it, they'll say, oh, just use the email Doris function. When you go to the email Doris function, it's to get help with a federal agency. Other members of Congress also have, you know, email Mike or email Adam or something like that, but it's for help with a federal agency. That is what that is used for. Usually, on a scheduling request form, it'll first ask you, do you want your meeting in district or in DC? So you know whether to request a meeting with her or her staff in their home district or in DC. And then it asks you for a date range and a time. It's very specific. And then they want to know the organization you're with. If you're with one, they want to know your address. They can confirm you're a constituent. And then you can put, you know, how many people are attending and what legislative asks you want to talk about. I know this because I've scheduled meetings for with Congress members for about 10 years now. So this is what you are asked. She doesn't have that anywhere on her website. If it's there now, it's because of me complaining about it. It has not been there. And her office knows I know about it, right? But I'm just nobody, right? I have no money, no power. So they just treat me like shit. They treat me like shit. And I know things. So if they're treating me like this, imagine how they're treating people who don't know as much as I do, right? So I'm an angry constituent, right? So the second I got that microphone, oh, guess who had to hold the microphone? Aaron Jones had to hold the microphone for me. So we were very close face to face, and he's holding the microphone for me. And so I basically say that, you know, I've been emailing your office for a long time. One of the reasons I ran for Congress is because you and your office don't respond to me. I've asked very specific questions about Medicare for all, yada, yada, yada. And I said, you know, there's basically a reason that the Democrats keep losing. It's because Democrats haven't been giving voters something to vote for, like a North Star, for a long time. And if they supported Medicare for all, that would basically be something that people could come out and vote for. I even mentioned to her that, you know, I've met with you before over healthcare over 10 years ago. I have a picture with you online somewhere, probably on her Facebook page. And she's just not been communicative with her constituents at all, basically. But when I said the part about how they're not giving Democrats something to vote for, and Medicare for all could do that because everything is just anti-Trump, 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 and they're not giving us anything to compel others to come vote for Democrats again, I got a round of applause, a big round of applause. And then I mentioned too that, you know, your staff are rude. At one point I said your staff are rude, as the rudest staffer is holding the microphone to my face as I say that about him. And that was the comment that made her the angriest the whole night, that I insulted her staff, even though I was spitting facts. I said one of the reasons I ran for Congress is because your staff ignores me, that I've been trying to reach her for a very long time. And so she got very angry. That was probably the angriest she was all night, because I was confronting her with the truth and I was calling her out on it. And she didn't like that. But so she just kept complaining that, you know, Medicare for all, I support universal health care. I support it. I support universal health care. Medicare is great. But right now, basically, we're fighting to even keep health care. So do we want to throw it all away by, you know, say we need Medicare for all? We're trying to even just save it right now, and then we can get there. You know, and that might have been when I said she has privilege too. I can't remember the order of things. Everything was a blur. It is online. I have watched it, but I still get things out of order. Because as I was saying things, I do not remember what I was saying. People had to tell me afterward that what I said was really good. But so anyhow, you know, it was so out of touch. And the thing is, I don't have the mic in front of me anymore either. But what I would have said is we are in this mess because of her. The reason why she thinks we still have to fight for the bare minimum health care is because she helped us lose to Trump. This is her fault. So now she's trying to act like some savior. What I also wanted to say too, because, Democrats like her keep talking about how we need to improve access to health care. Everyone has access to buy a mansion, but not everyone can afford it, right? So I had said earlier before they gave me the mic that it's very stressful to keep reapplying for healthcare every year. It's stressful. And you have to deal with means testing. Like, are you poor enough to get this kind of coverage and so on, And I said, she doesn't have to do that. She's never had to do that. And that's where she got upset over my comment that she was privileged. So anyhow, I sat down and then I was still heated. I was still really heated. I was grateful to Chet, though, for letting me have the floor because I definitely did not get called on to ask a question I had submitted. So that was nice. But I think you could tell that I was sitting there frustrated. And I think I had mentioned at that point, too, that one of the reasons I ran for Congress was because you don't respond. And so that was compelling, right? Like, how could you not talk to me after that? So, hey, this run for Congress, at least it got me that off the cuff comment, right? So then the night goes on. Someone asked her about whether or not she would support Hakeem Jeffries again because they're feckless. This guy used the word feckless. She supports Hakeem Jeffries. She said he's doing as best as he can. He's a good leader. So implying that she would vote for him again. Someone asked her to not accept any more corporate PAC and special interest money like APAC. And she said it doesn't matter who donates to her. That's bullshit because her longtime campaign manager, Roger Salazar, has said that she's been actually campaigning, like fundraising. So it does matter where the money comes from, right? And she has billionaires maxing out to her campaign at $7,000. That's the most you can donate. And I noticed on MyVang's graphics on her campaign social media platforms that they're saying that Doris Matsui raised 3 times as much as MyVang, but her donors, I think, are just about like 100 donors and they spend a lot of money, whereas MyVang has raised over $100,000, but has over 600 original donors or different donors. So that all makes a difference where the money comes from, doesn't it? So what else? There was a nurse practitioner who stood up and said, basically it's healthcare related, but, we are killing Palestinians with bombs that we provide to Israel still. Will you condemn this genocidal regime and stop taking money from APAC? So she could have easily said that was a campaign question, but she didn't. And even after when I talked about my run for Congress, she said, well, some of that is campaign talk. Well, she keeps saying that we need to take back the House. That is campaign talk right there. So shut up, Doris. Shut up. So this guy stands up. He's very measured. And I was measured too when I spoke initially. But so he was very measured. And so she said, it doesn't matter where the money comes from, and she just said it's very sad what's happening over there. And she's going to stick with the ceasefire, even though this guy said it's been broken and it hasn't broken. So she just kept going on saying as many words as possible to fill time and saying really nothing of substance and how we just need to get aid in and like it's nothing, right? Obviously, she doesn't write her own press releases. I'm just saying. So there is all that. And so the guy says, well, again, will you stop taking money from this genocidal regime or you condemn it or whatever he said? And she just wouldn't say. And so the guy sitting in front of me, who had been pretty quiet the whole time, but I know that we had been in DSA together, so I knew his positions basically. He said, do you condemn the genocide? And she wouldn't say anything, basically. And he kept going and, are you a genocide denier? She was born in a Japanese internment camp, although she definitely laughed that off. And there's a Comstocks interview with her from earlier this year, I want to say it's January, where someone brought that up, the internment camp, the fact that she was born into one. And she said, well, I was only there for 3 months, and she laughed it off. So I'm just providing some context there. But this guy said, you were born in an internment camp. And can you condemn this genocide, basically? And she wouldn't do it. So he got up, he stood up, and he was filming the whole time and over and over asking, like, do you condemn the genocide? Condemn the genocide? And she would not. She wouldn't call it a genocide. And then she said something, I don't remember exactly what she said, but something like, she doesn't support whatever's been happening over there. She doesn't like Bibi and everything. And it was kind of like, it's unsurprising. But when she says that it doesn't matter who gives her money, it's so clear that it does. Because why would this 81-year-old Democrat who's a moderate, why wouldn't she be able to say that what's happening over there is a genocide? Why wouldn't she be able to do that? Anyone else can say that. Basically, progressives can say that. Why can't she say it? Why can't she say it? She's representing a deep blue district. She could say the wrong thing 20 times a day and still get reelected if Mai Vang weren't running, right? That's how she's basically stayed in office the last 20 years. No one challenges her. She could stick her neck out on any issue and be wrong, and she would still get elected. So why can't she say the word genocide? And for those of you who wonder why people keep asking, why can't you call it a genocide? Why can't, why does it matter if you can't call it genocide? What does it matter what you call it? It matters because it's genocide. And if you deny that a genocide is happening, it goes all the way back to the Holocaust and how Americans basically ignored that as well when it's been live streamed in front of us. And it will affect your legacy, because if you acknowledge that a genocide was happening and that you were signing off on sending more bombs and money to Israel, in despite of them committing war crimes, then that is terrible for your legacy, right? So that's why they can't say it. They can't say it, even though it's what's actually happening. So, it just all kind of basically started to devolve. I was starting to disassociate myself. Some people got up and left. She wasn't answering questions. She didn't really answer any questions. Even a woman said, "You're not really answering these questions. They're all kind of the same anyway." And, there are people there who really like her. When I was talking to her, and when I looked, I felt like, okay, maybe I did talk a long time, but again, I haven't had a chance to talk to her, even though I've tried. When I was talking, some lady behind me said, "What's your question?" But when I watched it back, I didn't speak that long. So what the fuck was up with her, right? These people who just stand Doris Matsui because she's Doris Matsui, I'm sorry, I don't think they can flip. We've lost them. And they're part of the problem as well. These people who just watch MSNBC all day, these MSNBC pilled boomers in large. I'm sorry. And then these young people got up and were they were saying, "Let Gaza live," and more. And they were pointing out that Doris Matsui refused to meet with them. And this is the thing too that I kept basically not yelling angrily, but trying to yell to the moderator, because he was trying to quiet everyone down at this point. I said, she refuses to meet with constituents. So this is what happens. She doesn't meet with anybody. She doesn't meet with anyone who wants to talk to her about something nice even, right? She has no scheduling function on her website. She refuses to meet with constituents. So this is what happens. People get mad. They want to be heard. And when you're telling us to be respectful, and when the other people in the audience who like her are like, show some respect. You know what's disrespectful? Ignoring constituents. Being entitled to a seat you didn't earn. You woman who got your seat because of your husband's last name. Doris Matsui was unqualified for that seat in Congress. She only got it because of her husband's last name. If you cannot admit that, then you are part of the problem. Doris Matsui had no business being in Congress, and the people who wanted to run but who left their races so that she could win, are also spineless fucking cowards. Spineless. And they were men. No one is entitled to a seat, not even the widow of a man who was in office 26 years prior. And this is where we are today. And when people like Phil Cerna, Steve Hansen, Bobby Singh Allen, Kevin McCarty, Martha Guerrero, all these local electeds who continue to endorse her, they are part of the problem as well, and they're all fucking cowards. You know who else is a coward? The Central Labor Council. The Sacramento Labor Council continues to endorse Doris Matsui cycle after cycle. They endorsed her over a progressive last cycle too, because apparently he got into the race too late. Well, you know what? You're still endorsing the billionaire over a progressive. Fuck your system. Fuck your protocol. I took a class on running for an office from the Sacramento County Young Democrats. Fabrizio Sasso spoke. When I brought up the fact that they endorse wealthy incumbents over union organizers, for example, when I asked, I think, a general question about why they'll endorse wealthy incumbents over people like me, like their people, union organizers, union workers, he conceded that, yeah, it's about the money and like the viability. He actually said that he hated calling Katie Valenzuela, who was running for city council. He said, I didn't like the other guy, and I had to call her and say we weren't going to endorse her. This is what he said in a meeting in response to a question I asked. And this is the reason I started this podcast, because I'm sick and tired of the people in the Sacramento bubble who helped prop up Doris Matsui. People who want her seat but are too afraid to run or have told her, we will never challenge you, Doris Matsui. I know who you are. I know who has said that to her. When you continue to prop up a woman who keeps union workers back, Sacramentans back, constituents back, people who are struggling, when you bow to the billionaire who has not done anything memorable, profound for the Sacramentans, you are part of the problem and you are a coward. And I was told you people were cowards and unhinged before I decided to run. When I was looking around to make sure no one else was running, I was told those on the bench are cowards or unhinged. That's what I was told. That's what I was told. So I don't respect that. And when you're telling a group of people, when you tell me that you actually called Katie Valenzuela and you preferred her, that is part of the problem. And I actually said at the end of that training that, well, the one way to raise money is to get endorsements. And he said, you're right. This was the same meeting where that guy who was the campaign manager or the chief of staff for Katie Maple and who just quit that job so we could help run local campaigns, and who said, you basically have no business running for Congress if you have to work full time. And I'm sorry, it's just all about the money. Instead of coming up with other ways to help progressives win, you are also part of the problem. You are also part of the problem. Basically, almost every Sacramento elected is part of the problem. Because none of you have the spine to call out Doris Matsui, Kevin McCarty, Angelique Ashby, all these people who are just waiting on the sidelines because they're scared to run against a tiny little 81-year-old woman with money. They don't want to rock the boat. None of you have the spines to represent Sacramento. That is how angry I am. That's how angry that town hall made me last night. Because Doris Matsui was also very smug, and she smirked, and so did Aaron Jones, so did Glenda Corcoran on the side. I saw like tings of concern on the faces of the moderator. I think he was finally starting to get it. And I intend to email him later and just explain, this is what happens. The way people acted is what happens when this woman you venerate and say, oh, I've worked with her for a long time. It gets so frustrating to hear that. No one cares how long you've worked with somebody. How does she treat her constituents, people who are struggling? She has no skin in the game. I don't like her. Nobody should like her. People who do like her, that I've talked to when I was still running, they want her to retire. But I am sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of this. This Bobby Singh Allen, Kevin McCarty, Steve Hansen. She helped me one time, so I'm going to endorse her. It's all bullshit. All the endorsements are complete bullshit. Complete bullshit. And none of them should have had time to speak, too, at the No Kings rally. I talked to a friend of mine who helped organize the Detroit No Kings rally, and he said they didn't allow any politicians to speak. It was only organizers. The one in Detroit, they actually had, I think it was a Palestinian doctor got up and actually pointed out and called out their member of Congress who was standing there like a little kid. It's that guy named Shri. I can't remember how to pronounce his last name. Everyone just calls him Shri. He's a terrible member of Congress, though. It's really easy to call him out, but all they did was call him out, and even had a megaphone, but they silenced him. He actually just left. But the fact that we gave a platform to Doris Matsui and then Eric Swalwell, too, he's just like Doris Matsui. He's just younger and white. That guy thinks only of his career. And then these Democrats are reflecting on their loss. They're at like a 20-something% approval rating. Trump has a higher approval rating than the Democrats. And Doris Matsui, in her $10,000 necklace, her pink suit where the pants didn't match the jacket, for a billionaire, that's kind of inexcusable, I think. I was thinking, why can't you have a suit that matches? Whatever. She was so smug. And then when she says, listen to me, or please be quiet, or let me talk, or when people are getting told by other people that they're being disrespectful, you know what? This is what happens when you venerate someone who didn't earn her seat. She did not earn her seat. She's married to the prior congressman. That was her qualification. I'm so tired of these husband and wife teams getting elected. Oh my God. So, that town hall really pissed me off. Afterwards, I had walked by Mayor Bobby Singh Allen of Elk Grove on the way in, and I kind of acknowledged her, like I smiled at her or something, and she smiled back. And then afterwards, I had been wanting to say something to her anyway, but she was sitting in the front row when all this was happening, right? So I walked by her and I said, hi, my name's Erica Lee, and I was running for Congress. I reached out to your office many times through phone and email, many times, and I never got a response from you, but you endorsed Doris Matsui because you want her job. Couldn't help myself, but that's the truth, right? That's what everyone says. They say that about Stephanie Nguyen. They said that about Fabrizio Sasso. They've said that about, who else have they said that about? Angelique Ashby. They've talked about this with so many local electeds. That's why they don't press her, or they just keep endorsing her because they want her job. So Bobby Singh Allen, though, when I said that, well, you endorse her because you want her job. She said, you don't know me. You don't know me. I support blah, blah, blah. I said, no, I said, I know enough. I know enough. You supported that. You endorsed that. I know enough. You don't know me. You don't know me. No, you endorsed that. I know enough. That's basically how that conversation went. But I'm glad I said it because no one else does. It took me, a working class renter with actual skin in the game, who just doesn't have the time or money to challenge Doris Matsui and maybe get into the 6th district race because that's where I'm from. Oh God, I would be in there fighting for all of you so hard right now. And here's one more comment I have, and it's kind of related. And I know people are well-intentioned when they say this, but when I say that I'm not running against Doris Matsui anymore, they always say, like, not always, but they often say, have you thought about running for lower office? Here's the thing. My experience is in federal level office work. I already know what committees I'd be on. I already even know, for instance, what Republicans I could go work with on healthcare bills because of my work. I know who has a sick child with this one disease or a family member who's experienced this or that, who's been really good on other bills. Like, I know who to work with. You don't go into Congress knowing that unless you've been there a while, but I know it, right? And I have lived experiences not represented in Congress. And especially since only 2% of Congress is working class, it's wild that we're still even supporting people who can fund their own races and not work, right? I'm the person you want in Congress. Let's just be real. Listen to me right now, right? I told Doris Matsui she's privileged. And I got her to say she's not privileged, and that should end her career right there. But to those people who say, in earnest, so have you thought about, working in a lower race? Here's the thing. Those jobs, those races, those positions, those elected positions don't either pay very well or, you have to work while you do it too. And honestly, at this time, I'm not opposed to it, but this time I'm not interested. And when people say, well, you need to run lower office first to get experience, not really, because a lot of that doesn't even transfer to Congress. But you know what? You can't, and you can learn that in Congress. Once you're there, you can learn all those intricacies and things that I already know a lot of that stuff, right? Like, I'm a unicorn candidate. But here's the thing that people can't learn. So any people who are wealthy, who started in lower office, they can't learn my lived experiences. They don't have my lived experiences to represent people in Congress. I know what it's like to meet with constituents because I've been a constituent who's met with members of Congress over and over and over again. I've led those meetings with constituents for work when I lived in D.C. I know what those meetings are supposed to be like. I know how important it is for members of Congress to actually meet with their constituents. And when you can meet with your actual member of Congress, how incredible that is. Staff meetings are great too, and most of the staff direct their members, their bosses on what to support and so on, but it is still great to meet with your member of Congress. Doris Matsui does not do that. She does not do that. I know what offices are supposed to do. I know how they're supposed to be run already. But I'm the one who's not running because I have to work full time and I don't have money to self-fund my race. That is how I'm feeling right now. Because you can be sure if I had some progressive organization or if I had, Shoykat Chakrabarty's $100 million, I would quit my job. It wouldn't be working if I had $100 million. But I would be just running my own campaign, paying the whole thing and running as a progressive so people could save their money and donate to other grassroots candidates who needed it. But no, I can't run. That is how I'm feeling right now. When I go to these town halls where I know more than most, I am on another level. I am on another level than any candidate running in this area right now, I will tell you. I'm a unicorn candidate. I moved to DC by myself 10 years ago to help fix a broken healthcare system, never even realizing one day I would run for Congress. That is how much fight I have in the game, right? So Doris Matsui, fuck you. Fuck you. And your staff. Not all of them. I haven't had interactions with all your staff. But she did say, my staff are one of the greatest staffs there are, and she got applause to that. Well, they really aren't. They're good at protecting you, but they treat your constituents like shit. And obviously this town hall, I don't know what was up, why he decided. Maybe it's because I actually called Eric Swallow's office earlier in the week and said, hey, I know you like to go hold town halls in red districts where the Republicans aren't holding them. Maybe you should hold one for Doris Matsui in Sacramento. And then suddenly she's holding a last-minute town hall with no notice. A lot of people I learned later did not get the email with the address. And they did point out, even if we had the address, the fact that we had to wait until noon the day of to get the email, and the doors open at 5:15 and it opens at 6, and you say we have to get there early if we actually want to ask a question. You have to arrange for childcare, and some people are working, or if they're working, they can't leave. And if they're not live streaming it, then what's the point? What is the point? And we know they lied about it being full and waitlisting people. It was not full at all. I cannot believe how big that place was, that they waitlisted that many people. With as much time as they gave people to RSVP, there's no way that many people RSVP'd and just didn't show. Right? We know that they picked and chose who could and couldn't come. They didn't get the email with the address, and they could say later, "Oh, we sent it," or "Oh, there was a mistake." Oh, like it was. Until they prove otherwise, that is what everyone believes. That people, because when I called the DC office too, they said it was the district office that was handling that. So who was handling the registration? Who had their hands on the registration for the town hall? Who made sure that some people didn't get the emails with the address? Who made sure that some were waitlisted right away, some agitators, some perceived agitators, that they were waitlisted right away and didn't get in? Who was that? Was it Glenda Corcoran, her district manager? District director, I mean? Was it Aaron Jones, one of her case managers? Who else in the office? Who was responsible for that? That's what the Sacramento Bee should be asking. That's what the Sacramento Bee should be asking. But I'm angry. Finally had a town hall. I'm glad that people saw me and heard me say what I had to say, that I called her out, that this is a pattern she has. She's probably never, ever going to have another town hall ever again, right? At this point, she's probably never going to have a town hall. But for people who say she's done a good job, no, she really hasn't. She's a basic Dem. People who praise her on the flooding thing, if you read that Comstocks article from January where she laughs off the fact that she was born in an internment camp, she said she was elected and then she learned about the flooding. So when people ask candidates that want to challenge her, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Doris Matsui didn't know basically anything when she was elected. She had to go in and learn. So yeah, she would go on the flooding thing, but any decent Dem, any basic Dem elected to that seat would have addressed the flooding. She's nothing special. Oh, someone did ask her, we need to see you fighting. She's like, well, I am fighting. And she says, yeah, but we never see you on TV or anything. And she says, well, I think it's more important to see results and whatever. And someone said, we can do both. And she had said, well, my colleagues, they're great people, the ones who go on TV all the time, but they're maybe not getting as much done. Or she said something like that. So my first thought was, oh, Eric Swalwell? I should have called his office today and said, did you know that Doris Matsui thinks that you're not working very hard because you go on TV a lot to talk about Trump and whatever? So she made a dig at her colleagues inadvertently, I think. But we all know why she doesn't want to go on TV, because everything she has to do is scripted. That is why this was a heavily curated town hall. That's why there was no notice. They hoped no one would come. It's why they didn't advertise it on all social media platforms, only on her Facebook page, in the hopes of attracting more older people who are fans of hers and don't think too deeply on her donors and things like that. It was all calculated. You cannot get one over on me, Doris Matsui's district office. I know exactly what you're doing. I've worked on campaigns off and on for 20 years. I've worked in a DC office. I've tuned into so many town halls for members of Congress who are my own just because I'm just interested and I'm curious. And they let anyone come. But you didn't let anyone come to this one. Why are you so scared of letting people see what Doris Matsui has to say? It's because she has to do everything scripted. When she goes off script, she's not good because she's not staff to write her words for her. So I'm getting repetitive, but I'm just very angry right now. I think Doris Matsui should resign, actually. I still can't believe that the Bee did not report on the fact when I reached out to them and let them know that she was supposed to be here for the August recess and she wasn't here, and that her comm staff was recycling old pictures of her on social media to make it look like she was actually working in the district, but just slapping new logos on them. No one addressed that. They didn't say that she was sick or her husband was sick. Because usually they would. If someone were ill, they'd say, well, she's staying in D.C. like her primary residence. It shouldn't be her primary residence. But, oh, she's not feeling well. Oh, so she didn't come home. Okay. They didn't say any of that. She just finally had to come home because her office was flooded with calls about ICE. Because at the federal building where they were keeping people who had been arrested by ICE, they were sleeping on the floor overnight and they weren't supposed to be. So she had to come home. And then that's when she had that labor forum as well. I don't know if that was a last minute scheduling or what. I didn't get that much information. But I'm sick and tired of just being nice to everybody in Sacramento politics. I've only been talking to these people like the last few months. I've been doing all the work for years behind the scenes. I hadn't been going to all these Democratic meetings or anything like that because I'm actually helping candidates directly. And, a lot of people don't have time to do all that too, especially when you just go and it's just administrative stuff or whatever. But I will say one club meeting that I really have enjoyed going to be quite honest, is the American River Democratic Club, the American River Dems. They have their monthly meeting the third Wednesday of every month at Fair Oaks Library. That is a great group. It's a large group. They're doing a lot of the volunteer activities, and they are, I think, one of the most engaged clubs, the Democrat clubs in the area. It's a bigger club. It's like Sacramento County, Heidi Hall came and spoke there the other day because she's currently running in District 3, but if Prop 50 passes, that'll become part of her new district. So she gave a speech the other day, but they usually have you break into groups and do some group work. It's kind of fun. It's just kind of nice to hang out with fellow Democrats in a sense, This last meeting, they did go over the No Kings rally, and most people had really great things to say about it. Then there's me, the gadfly. But again, I just know too much. So thanks for listening to all that. Basically, I probably even forgot some things, but the Bee wrote this up. You can definitely go to the Sacramento Bee. There's a picture of me standing up talking to Doris Matsui with the guy who's holding the microphone is the asshole in her office, Aaron. So that was, again, me saying that your staff is rude while the rudest staff member is holding the microphone for me to talk is just like peak amazing. So there's that. She's probably feeling bad for them today and buying everyone else a $10,000 Van Cleef and Arpels necklace because I dared call them rude. So I did see her district director hanging out in the back, Glenda Corcoran. I also did see that there was some kind of Secret Service agents, or I don't know if he was actually Secret Service, but he had an earpiece in standing off to the side of the stage to protect her. I mean, that's understandable. I don't know if all members of Congress have that or if it's just her. But if she paid for it, great. But speaking of tangent, one thing I did notice she did not have there was an ASL interpreter, no sign language interpreter. So I don't remember if when you completed the web form, if it says you need any kind of accommodations. So they might have said, well, we don't need one because no one said that they are hard of hearing, but it doesn't matter because anyone else, they were just letting basically anyone in at one point. And you should always have an ASL interpreter. And Doris Matsui has all the money in the world to even like offer someone, hey, can I pay you $1,000 to come sign at my town hall at the last minute? I mean, who would turn that down, right? She had no interpreter, and that is bad for an entrenched Democrat to not even think of having an ASL interpreter there. Especially if they had live streamed it, especially if they were recording it too. I guess they can add captions later, but they still should have had an ASL interpreter there in case somebody came like with their child or even who's deaf. You should always have an ASL interpreter. Every candidate at any event, any forum, whatever, debate, always have an ASL interpreter. I think there are organizations that even do on a volunteer basis nearby. I feel like I saw a pop-up tent at one of the events I went to, but, or you should include it in your budget. But no ASL interpreter for a Democrat who should know better and a staff who's apparently so on top of it. Thanks for listening. Yeah, so here's the thing too. This first week or 2 weeks or so of this podcast has been, a lot of it is practice for me because I am just learning how to edit video, right? I've had podcasts before, but I just did audio. So I'm doing video. So I'm getting better at it. I'm getting faster at it now that I know what to do. So what I wanted to do though is make sure that I knew what I was doing before I actually started recording guests and editing them into my podcast. But the good news is I have some guests lined up, some very special guests. So it won't always be just me talking, okay? But, for all of you who've listened to me just go on and on about this already, I really appreciate you. I very much appreciate you. Again, this podcast is paid for all by me. I pay for the platform Buzzsprout that shoots it out to all the the podcasting platforms. I pay for Zoom. I pay for Descript. I pay for all myself, and I produce everything myself. It is no way related to my prior campaign or any future campaigns. My Act Blue is still open, though, for a few more days at least. So like I said earlier, I am probably going to owe money more than I raised because most of my money went to paying people to do my finances for me because they can be very tricky and I didn't have help with that. And when Prop 50, when the whole redistricting thing came about, I didn't know where to campaign because there was no proposed map yet. So I stopped hardcore asking for money because it felt disingenuous to ask people for money if I didn't know where to campaign, especially if I wasn't sure at that point, am I going to still continue to run? Things were very confusing for several weeks. And then when I heard the rumor that my vein was going to get in, and I heard like 10 rumors, so I didn't campaign as hardcore because I thought, well, this sounds like it's going to happen, right? So I don't want to keep asking for money. But two things. One, I lost my biggest work contract because I work in politics. That's what helped give me this experience to be able to run for Congress, because they felt it was a conflict of interest. It was worth thousands of dollars. And I lost that contract that I've worked on every year for the last several years, and I'm never getting it back. And then also, I think I'm going to be owing a little bit of money, and I'm a working class renter. So if anyone would like to consider just, throwing a few dollars my way at the Act Blue that I will post in this, at the end of this podcast on the social media platforms and so on, I would very much appreciate it. I understand if you can't, and, I'm not typically running, although I could still run. But, at this point, if I am still going to run in the 6th district where I live right next to where I'm from, it's at this point probably going to be an insurgent campaign, because I can't run again and work full time and try to raise money like I was when I was challenging Doris Matsui. I can't handle that again. It's very hard. And that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast too, so I could share how hard it was and why candidates like me need more support, and why we need to just stop picking candidates just because they're able to run full time, or, because the people that you really want in Congress are the people like me, the reluctant leaders who, have skin in the game and who know what it's like to live as an average American. So anyway, I'm just going on and on at this point. So if you can like, share, subscribe, rate the podcast if you can, if you're able to, on Spotify and the Apple Podcast app, and doing the similar things on YouTube, I would very much appreciate it. So anyway, thanks for listening, and hang in there.